Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues. I'd like to say a few words about the objection to renewing the authorization of pyriproxyfen, which I'm defending today as an MEP, and above all, as a doctor. As a healthcare professional, I have worked very hard throughout my career to alert patients to the various health risks that they may face. In this regard, you will acknowledge that the focus on prevention is probably the most important aspect of healthcare professions, and the coronavirus crisis is a very good example of that. Now, we, in many ways, are there to alert patients, but we're also there to observe, and our role is to spot weak points in the system, in the healthcare systems. Given these unknown dangers, if they're identified early, the best remedy is the precautionary principle. Now, as far as the objection is concerned, I'm sure that you have seen in the details that it's centered around three key points. Firstly, pyriproxyfen is a pesticide which stops the growth of larvae and insects. It's therefore used extensively in farming to combat pests. EFSA and the Commission have concluded that it's not dangerous, although this is widely disputed by an array of detailed studies that are available and sourced in my objection. These reveal that pyriproxyfen is an endocrine disruptor, which affects biodiversity as well as human and animal health. Secondly, the product is used in springtime, especially in orchards when they're in full bloom, and it's responsible, like neonicotinoids, for pollinator decline. Finally, the draft regulation by the Commission, which will lead to the renewal of pyriproxyfen as an active substance, indicates to Member States that the Commission has concerns regarding the health and the environment, and that it calls Member States to pay particular attention to exposure of consumers to pyriproxyfen residue in food, protection of organisms living in sediment, aquatic organisms, and the protection of bees as well. The Commission has itself identified this risk, but by playing a balancing act and by hiding behind EFSA recommendations, it is clearly deciding to extend the authorization of a product despite all of the warning signs. Therefore, colleagues, I would like to ask you to share my concerns as a doctor and apply the precautionary principle by voting in favour of this objection so that pyriproxyfen is no longer a risk for Europeans or for biodiversity. Thank you very much.
So we move to the shadows, the EPP and Christine Schneider.
Yeah, thank you. Pyriproxyfen is an insecticide das in
This is an insecticide which is used in plants, and this is about the authorization. EFSA has concluded that pyriproxyfen is not an endocrine disruptor, and therefore it's appropriate to renew the authorization, which is going to extend at the end of the year. Now, when it comes to pollinators, I would like to say that Member States, where it is authorized, use it in very specific circumstances. For example, in many different plants. Obviously, always need to protect bees, but I think that we should follow EFSA conclusions and we should vote against this objection. I'd also like to mention one other thing. Pyriproxyfen is used to protect bees, and I think it's therefore very contradictory in this situation that we could use this outside, but then we should restrict its use as a pesticide. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't have any speaker for SND. So if you want to, if there is an SND member, please raise your button and we will get back to you. For Renew, we have Martin Ossik. We can't hear you.
Let me try again. Can you hear me now?
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you. So thank you, Chair. And as you might know, I'm someone who is fighting the overuse, and especially the hazardous pesticides. And in this autumn, when we did objection, and the European Parliament supported objection against the package of pesticides, which included pyriproxyfen, there was no concern raised about this one. Why? Because it doesn't really meet the cutoff criteria to be banned. The EFSA peer review concluded that there is a low risk to bees, and of course, there is more information that we need on some of the outdoor use issues. But I think, and that is what is really, really important, is the authorization as it is basically also with a certain restrictions. And I think this is something which is a very prudent move on the side of the Commission. Sorry. So I do not recommend to support this objection. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I have no speaker for the Greens. So I move to ECR and Alexander Vondra.
Yeah. Can you hear me now? Thank you, Pascal. So, as usually, we oppose also this objection, and we reject the objector's claim that the pyriproxyfen has a negative impact on the pollinators and human health, and that is incompatible with the safety requirement of the needed regulation. The Commission has followed all the required procedures and has not exceeded its implementing powers. No scientific concerns were raised by any of the independent agencies which were involved in assessing the renewal, and according to EFSA conclusions, pyriproxyfen is not to be considered an endocrine disruptor for either human health or for the non-target organism. So we cannot support these objections. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alexander. No speaker for the GUE. So we move to the Commission. Mike, you want to?
Just to say that we would support the objection. Thank you.
So the Commission, Mr. Behrendt, remotely.
Yes, hello, good afternoon, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the floor. Indeed, several of the speakers have already mentioned the arguments that I wanted to bring, but I will just briefly summarize them nonetheless. Indeed, the Commission's proposal is based on the EFSA conclusions, and we have diligently followed all procedures in Regulation 1107/2009 and have clearly not overstepped our implementing powers. According to the EFSA conclusion, pyriproxyfen is not an endocrine disruptor, and it is, as an insect growth regulator, also overall of low concern for human or animal health because of its specific mechanism in which it works. In fact, insect growth regulators are very valuable tools in the box for farmers. They have quite unique properties insofar as they do not affect insects' nervous systems, and they are less prone to resistance development. They are also more compatible with biological controls and integrated pest management. So, in fact, pyriproxyfen is not classified for any human health hazard. It is of low acute toxicity. It is not genotoxic, unlikely to be carcinogenic, unlikely to be teratogenic, and it does not impair reproductive performance. And there is in particular also no indication of a link between pyriproxyfen and microcephaly. So to respond to Ms. Mélin's comment that all signals are on red, no, quite on the contrary, they are actually very much on green. As far as the environment is concerned, there is indeed a need to apply appropriate risk mitigation measures, as mentioned by Ms. Schneider and Mr. Heusek, in particular to protect surface waters and bee larvae. But this can be done, and we have proposed, as noted by Ms. Schneider in our draft regulation, that the member states have to pay particular attention to these and impose appropriate risk mitigation measures, such as banning the use during flowering periods. So the overall conclusion of the process is clearly that it may be expected that plant protection products containing pyriproxyfen will fulfill the safety requirements in the pesticides regulation, provided that all the risk mitigation measures are implemented. Therefore, we see no grounds to withdraw the draft implementing regulation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So we are a bit ahead of the schedule, but we will close the discussion here, and we will move to the committee vote on this objection. So I declare the vote open up to 7:30. So you have a bit more than 1 hour to vote on this objection, and the answers and the results, sorry, will be shared in writing as usual now. So we are done, and thank you very much.